making good business decisions, or just making decisions in general. We talk about in organizations of decentralizing decision making down to every level, the people that are closest to the work, right? This aligns with the big conversation about empowerment. But here's the thing, have we really helped empower everyone to make good decisions, or even how they make decisions? So today, Roxanne and I are going to dive in to 5 steps on how to make better business decisions. And yes, no title required, but also we'll add a couple of tidbits in the mix as we dive into these as well. So come join us as we get started now. What was that? Did that chop up like for you too? I'm like, what the heck was that?
That was
You're
the
like,
live,
whatever.
right? Beauty of live. Whatever, exactly.
Welcome everyone to the Game Changing Work channel. Those of you that are live on the LinkedIn platform, either through my profile or Roxana's, hello, how are you doing there? And also those of you that might be watching us on the other social platforms like as Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube. So let's get started on this topic today. I thought this was very interesting, right? Because even though we're talking about 5 steps, it's really about the whole subject going into the modern workplace of empowering people.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking, looking at the title, because, we're talking about 5 steps to a successful decision-making process. But as you and I are going to talk about it today, it has everything to do with people involved in the process to make sure that it's a successful decision-making process. So let's get down to it.
Yeah, and those of you, question for you, those that are watching live now or the replay, is how are you able to make decisions where you are? How close are you connected to be able to say, yeah, I made a good business decision, right? So a lot of the organizations that I step into, Roxana, and kind of sharing is, we try to implement Agile. Agile is always about just decentralized decision making, having a customer-centric approach, and really helping tie and connect business strategic initiatives, right? Same thing with OKRs. But however, if we really want to peel the layer back, with a lot of people that are working in what I would call it these agile teams, these product teams, if you probably asked a lot of them, when it comes to decision making, I would say they're probably not necessarily wearing the entrepreneur thinking or business hat in every organization. I'd say that probably the larger the organizations become, it becomes a lot more challenging for leaders out there. What say you?
Yeah, it is more challenging when you have that hierarchical structure and where you have a lot of bureaucracy when it comes to decision making. And actually, that's a big one that I find when I talk to the mid to senior managers that I work with, and especially with emerging leaders who don't think they have a lot to say about the decisions that are being made, who don't think they have a voice that can be heard. And actually, that is relating to what you were saying. That is particularly harmful because you don't know, first of all, at the level of the organization, you don't even know if you have the full data, if you have the full background, if you understand what you need to understand in order to be able to make a decision. Because right, I mean, I have to look at something, I have to know the background information so that I know where I want to go. And that doesn't happen, and that's a big thing. And what you and I have always been saying. Are you involving your people, and are you involving the right
Mm-hmm.
people the right way in these processes?
And a lot of people might even wonder is why would somebody that's a developer on an agile team, for example, right, where in my world is why they even need to know about the business to make a business decision to be able to code. Well, their code has a direct impact, right? For thinking customer centricity, all the way to the point at getting out to market. Everything they do, the energy, the creativity, all of that has a direct impact to the customer, which in turn has a direct impact to your business. So it's all connected, right? It's almost the spider web connection that there's always some connectivity to that. So when we jump into this business decision steps, we wanted to get people to think about a couple of things. So, yes, we're going to talk about some steps to think about, but we also are going to pause and talk about how you can actually do something a little bit differently within them. Do you want to start with the first step? It's probably an obvious for most people.
Yeah, exactly. But with a game changing hat on, you never know where that obvious is going to take you. So,
oh yeah. And so the first one is really considering that question of defining your problem and what really is the problem. A lot of times we're highly reactive and we only go probably at surface level when it comes to the problem. So we all know how to use maybe some of those processes, the 5 whys and what might have you. But the one thing, and I pulled out this book before we actually joined the show, was that might still be a little linear. And what do I mean by linear? So I don't know if any of you guys ever read this book. Ooh, let me put it in the right. What's your problem? Okay. I really like this book. Thomas Wettlesborg. I might have botched the name up. Sorry, Thomas. But one of the things that when it comes to defining a problem is not doing it in a vacuum, right? You talk about the power of teaming, but here's one thing when it comes to reframing problems that even if you address a problem, even in the beginning, you might already be starting in a way that is at a disadvantage. And so here's an example. So think of you're trying to solve a problem with this one that they have in the book about an elevator, right? And they first problem identified is that somebody's saying the elevator's too slow, right? So if you're getting customer feedback, you're a company that actually develops or does things to improve elevators. Your initial reaction is to probably go into the mechanics of improving that elevator, right? That's pretty straightforward. Well, according to the book on what's your problem, they say, no, look at the problem a little bit differently. And here's the example they have. Instead of the elevator being too slow, the real problem was the wait time was annoying for the people. So this is where it goes all the way down to design thinking and really understanding your customers and what's really happening, right? So you might need to ask further questions or a different perspectives to even reframe that. Because how would you know directly if you don't ask the right questions?
If you don't ask the right questions, you're not going to get answers that are specific enough. Mm-hmm. And so you won't know what the actual problem is. You won't be able to make a diagnosis. Like, think of yourself as a doctor, right? You have to get to the root cause to be able to give a prescription. Now, we know, like, not all doctors go there, but ideally you want to get to that root cause, because you don't want to give a treatment that is only going to take the pain away for it as a temporary solution. So it's the same thing. And what we see, I've seen that a lot of times, like working in learning and development. Trust me, you get a lot of that. You get a lot of what I call fake problems. Like, they need they're not good with communication, and they need a communication training. Okay, that is not specific enough. That does not actually tell me what the problem really is. That tells me what you think the problem is and what you think they need as a solution. And oftentimes the problem is not related to their abilities to communicate. It is related to their ability and to trust each other, and that's deeper than just communication skills. That goes down to the culture that they operate in and the environment they operate in and everything else. So understanding what the problem is, first of all, means that people are going to come and are going to be able to feel that they can
Mm-hmm.
express themselves. If they worry about, should I say this or shouldn't I? How is that going to affect me? That does not help you make a good business decision. Because if you don't know what they think, if you don't know what risks they see, then how can you possibly make a good business decision?
And some of you are probably going, wow, we didn't think that they would even go into this subject when we talked about the 5 steps. Well, we are game changers. We are going to pull and
Oh, dear.
challenge. It's our nature. So if any of you have ever experienced, even in this first step about the problem and where
Yeah.
it's gone sideways or the lack of perspective, that is one thing that is also important, to where you want to make sure that you get the different perspectives of what a problem might be. So you were talking about trust and people, but there's the other half where we know that everyone looks at problems differently.
Yeah.
That's why we love the Game Changer Index, and seeing how someone's perspective might even be different about a problem. And so when we start to work with all these different perspectives, then we get to peel that onion even further, which I think is pretty cool, because it really goes into the second thing is, okay, now since we got a little deeper and understand the perspective of what the problem might be, now we need to make sure that we're gathering more insights to actually understand about it, right? Now, again, this goes a lot with those of you that might be, practicing design thinking and product discovery in that world. So this isn't foreign to you, but this is no different, that you can use these practices even outside of product development, because you still need to be able to reframe a problem and make sure that you actually are thinking of the problem in a way where it's constructive. Right? We learn that in life coaching to help people look at the problem in a way where they can start shifting it to more of an outcome. Mm-hmm. Because gathering information and start evaluating your options is making sure that you're moving yourself towards that model. And this even aligns to the Neuro Leadership Institute when it comes to the SCARF model, because we know that the problem space is sitting in an area where it could actually increase some of those negative emotions. And if we sit there, mm-hmm. that's where not creativity lies. So that perspective about the problem needs to be constructive and shifting away from all the things that are not working, is my point. And so when we're gathering that information, it talks about the people that you might need to get insights from, different stakeholders, thinking about the different constraints and asking people. This goes back to, okay, well, if it's an internal problem in an organization, if we were to ask people, are they going to actually give us true insights so that that process of gathering the information is actually going to help us? I mean, how many times have you been in an organization, those of you that are listening right now, where you do a survey, and even if it's anonymous, you still feel like you're not really getting true information?
Well, because here I have my opinion about surveys that are anonymous, because again, first of all, people don't trust that they're anonymous inside an organization. And to be honest, everything can be tracked. So if I want to track, maybe I'm going to find a way to track that. So, and then there's no accountability. And that, for instance, that's a flag for me. Because if you have to do anonymous surveys within your team, what does that really say about how people feel when they're asked to be honest in a conversation inside your organization? Mm-hmm. Do we really have to hide behind that wall of anonymous to be able to say something, to be open and say something that we really believe in. And I mean, that is one thing. But one exercise that you can do, and actually that there is a method that's used in critical thinking a lot, which is the 6 thinking hats. And I always encourage my clients to use it with when it comes to making decisions, or when it comes to where we're at, discussing what the problem is and how people feel and think about that problem, because that allows you to look at the same thing from different perspectives, and that allows people to put that hat on and just give them the accountability and responsibility to look at a problem with that particular hat on, with the critical hat or with the emotional hat on. And then they will express their opinion depending on what they see when they're wearing that hat on. And they will be more honest, and you don't need to have an anonymous survey. You can have a brainstorming session that's really powerful and that lays down a lot of really useful information for you. So I'm actually going to put a link to a
Share
video that I
that.
have.
If
So I
you
have
can,
a video on that, and you can use this method and let us know how it worked for you.
yeah, if you can drop it in the chat right now, if you have a moment, or we can do it afterwards,
Yeah.
that would be awesome. Now, here's another thing too, when you were talking about, that's a subjective aspect of gathering information. We also know that we need to do data observations. Now, data is huge in organizations. So you probably go, what does this have to do with everyday decision making? Well, when we're talking about good business decisions, you want both. You want the subjective, even the gut, right? And then also the data. You want all of these different aspects there. Now, here's the truth. Most organizations, if I was to ask what their health metrics are, and how they know that their business is in the red, or how things are going, or how they're measuring, I can tell you right now, a lot of the organizations do not have all the metrics in place today. I have not yet gone to an organization that has everything in place so they can actually answer these questions. And one of the things I'm just going to say, hey, I'm dropping, I need a baby elephant. I like how to drop my little baby elephant when I say something. So knowing that most of you that might be listening that are in the agile world, we go to a lot of organizations that the first thing that we try to do is get them to start measuring. And it's not necessarily a full focus for them. It ends up being an afterthought. And so we can be in a whole entire transformation, I swear, without any metrics in place.
Yeah.
And then we're only putting superficial metrics like velocities and all these things, but to run their business, we still don't have the health metrics in place. And then also the things that we're building, we don't even know the things that we're building actually are doing what we need to drive our strategic initiatives. I see this every single day, day in out, everywhere I go. And so when we talk about making good business decisions and no title required, this also would allow empowerment to actually happen down at these team levels, because they have these metrics, they have this data, they have the insights to actually say, wow, this feature I built, it actually did this to the, to help the customer and actually drove our business by that. It's amazing how it's completely disconnected out there today. And so I went on my soapbox on that one for a little bit. But those of you that are watching, I'm very curious is, what have you been experiencing? Are those things in place? So when we talk about making a decision and empowering people, what kind of information is really there to make a sound one? Is it a lot from gut checking or subjective thinking? And where does it actually end and begin is my question. And the next one, are we ready to jump into that one?
Let's do that one.
All right. So now, since you have all these insights, develop and evaluate your options. Now, again, this is where group teams are highly valuable than doing it individually. Even if you are a leader, no matter what level you are, is to be bringing in other people because of the perspective that they might have and the options. One of the things that we do know, which I find this quite interesting, is you may be with a group of people that think very linear and very usual, as I would call thinking. And you know where I'm going with this. They're missing their game changers. That they are not thinking of the options and really creative different ways of how to approach something. It's very straightforward, those options.
Yeah.
And so,
Or
yeah.
not necessarily that they're missing game changers, but they don't even know they have them. Because, and you and I know what happens when you go into an organization and you show them these are the kinds of energies that you have in your team. How did it go for you? How much have you used them to the right, to their full potential? Because sometimes it's just about that understanding. If you want a different kind of solution, who are you asking and when? And are you actually asking? Do they feel that they can contribute or not? Because what happens a lot with people who can, and actually that's another point that goes into motivation and engagement, because you think you don't have them, but the potential is there. You just don't know who you have and how you can engage them so that you raise those levels, because the people are there. So when you look and when you have the snapshot of how your energies are distributed in your team and how people can contribute to developing solutions to the current problems that you have, how about that for a successful decision making, where you have everybody engaged in actually then implementing?
And you can tell when you are in this phase, right? Third phase of options, you can tell if it's lacking different approaches and it's very straightforward. I would call it the lackluster. Now, maybe someone like myself and you can sense it very easily because we're game changers. We're like, okay, there's nothing exciting and interesting about these suggestions. But if you realize that you're still doing the same thing but a different way, that's a telltale sign that you really haven't pushed the edge of something different, like truly different is my point. It's just same with a different flavor. It's like me when I buy something and I like a shirt or like a pair of shorts and I think, oh, they feel good. You know, I like the way they look and I buy every color. Is it really different or it's just a different color? Right?
And let us know, people, is it just Veronica who does this or are you doing this as well? That's
oh my God.
That's the question.
I do. When I find something, I'll buy like every color of it if I really like something. But that is kind of my analogy of when we get into these options is that you tend to stay in the same lane, right? It's the safe space. It's not really pushing beyond doing something different, because here's the thing. When we're talking about making successful business decisions, it has a direct correlation to experimentation.
Yep. Exactly. To experimentation and it comes to imagining possibilities and making scenarios going towards those different possibilities and having everybody's perspective into those scenarios, and then really agreeing to, okay, which scenario makes the best sense for us right now. And what you and I have seen, especially when we use business assessment tools like the Game Changing Index, is that people understand where everybody is coming from. They're more ready to listen to other people's perspectives, because one of the biggest problems in decision making is not that we don't think about solutions or we don't think about good solutions. It's that people cannot agree on which is the best solution at that moment, because they're not ready to listen to what the other has to say. Because if I think I have the best idea ever and this is the solution to go with, how how does that go with me listening to you and you're giving me a completely different solution to the problem, right? If I'm convinced that my solution is the best. And it's not that, it's moving from that model where we're looking for the best solution to actually agreeing on the solution that we all agree on, that is the best solution at this moment right now.
And that's where it's great why we use hypotheses and taking science experiments,
Yeah.
where, most of the successful business people out there are risk takers, but some of them will even say, I'm a calculated risk taker. So it doesn't
Exactly.
mean that you can't take risks. And so when we talk about making successful business decisions, it's allowing all of this process from really understanding the problem that we talked about, gathering information in very unique ways, and evaluating these options to the point where you're going to choose the best action to where you're at right now, that you described, is allowing everyone to have a voice, how to talk through that, because you're going to have different approaches of how everyone is thinking, right? Are they more strategic in that, or is it somebody that's really trying to challenge that status quo and really push the edge and wanting change? Or you have someone that's really concerned about perfection and quality and excellence in the plan, right? That decision that we're going to make. Or it's more about just getting it done, right? It's more about just, I want a result. So how about if you had a room where it's imbalanced and you have a lot of people that just want a result, but the decision that you actually land on is from pure pressure because you just were so impatient to just have a result, or you were so impatient about some of the ideas that you couldn't see through it, so you weren't open to it.
And that happens a lot, and that we see a lot, I think. And that's where we also see a lot of frustration. And guess what that does to your motivation and engagement levels?
Oh, it goes down. I know that from a fact because of being a game changer and always trying to help people change in my profession, which I don't know if that's healthy for me sometimes. Because
not.
Well, I'm just being honest. When I think about it, is because
I know
most of the time we're trying to challenge it. It's regardless of you want that collaboratory of like kind of thinking it through versus I'm scared of what you said because it's so foreign, right? That's why I'm so obsessed about the influencer language and behavior part of it, because it gets very frustrating when you're trying to get people to do something differently. That's what you're hired for. But that change, right? Change is painful, right? Who's ever like gone a workout plan and it like you're gonna get the beef muscles without doing any work? I mean, that doesn't work that way, right?
Yeah, somebody else does the push-ups for you and your muscles just grow. Amazing. Of course. Woo-hoo. That happens all the time, right?
So in this decision-making process, and why we are saying about empowering and talking about decentralized decision making, it's still about collective. It's all about collective impact when it comes to businesses, and encouraging all this diversity to eventually converge when you're making a decision and choosing the best action. And then the last thing is, just because you've already come up with a decision doesn't mean that you're not going to do anything with it and reflect on how it's actually doing. So how many of you have ever been in a meeting where you came to a decision, but then nothing happens after that?
And then, okay. And what happens next? What do we have to do now? Nobody knows.
So you go back 2 weeks for a follow-up. And I remember when I was a project manager, like back in the day, and I'd be like, so what happened with this, right? Nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No one did anything with it.
Beautiful.
And so part of that decision-making process, it doesn't matter if you made a decision if you're not doing anything about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where you do want to know, by the way, where the people who can help with implementing that decision are, and how, and let them know, like, hey, okay, so now let us know how are we going to do it? What's the deadline? Who's going to do what by when? And all sorts of things like that. That's the minimum that you can do. But as we were talking about all of this, I was thinking from the influencing perspective, when it comes to decision making, I think the question is, are you looking to influence people to adopt your decision or a decision? Because
Aha!
it's completely different. Like if you come with an agenda, oh, I know what the decision should be, but I want them to, we're going to just pretend that we're discussing and brainstorming. But at the end, I really want them to adopt this particular decision
So it might as well just
versus,
you might as well come to the
versus
table and be honest that you're just trying to sell it.
exactly. Like, but how many, and I've seen that done so many times, and people can definitely tell. Like they can tell that there's a hidden agenda. And that's where they're not going to trust, and they're not going to contribute fully in that brainstorming or in that decision
That's
making
a
process. So
that's
that's
actually a good topic. There is a way when we talk about measuring impact energy.
yeah.
There is a particular energy of playmaking which we're talking about. And
Mhm.
depending the level of playmaking that you have against your other dominant energies, that influencing naturally will happen regardless if you are trying to be cognizant of it. So
Yeah.
in truth, our energy, we're always in playmaking with the influence of the game changer. And so we have to be reminding ourselves all the time is it might not be our decision, but we might be influencing the change so much that that is what we're pushing on,
Yeah.
that could impact that whole process, right?
Yeah,
So
and it could, and we might be missing out actually on a better solution that might have just come out of that discussion just because we're pushing our own agenda forward. Like in the example with the elevator that we were discussing at the beginning, if my agenda is to push for the elevator to have a new engine, to purchase a new engine because the elevator is slow, and I'm going to do that and I'm going to push for that, I will be missing out on the other solution, on actually making the wait time a little bit more pleasant and putting some mirrors in place for people to, and some hand sanitizer for people to have something to do as they're waiting for the elevator. So again, like thinking from this perspective, think about what you might actually be missing out if you're approaching decision making from a top down perspective rather than what you said, the spider web, the network, and
and
engaging and involving people.
and there's a lot and where I'm kind of going with this is that you don't want to fight a current. And what do I mean by that is understanding yourself and who you are is you accept and appreciate that and you try to work within it.
Mhm.
And that's not fighting against the current. So kind of explaining what we're saying is all these different energies of what kind of playmaker you are and what influences what. I'm not going to try to change the game changer in there. I'm not. Because it's there, it exists, it's lurking. And if I keep trying to push it down, all it's doing is making me miserable as a person. And so,
Yeah,
yes, we want to think about emotional intelligence and awareness and what might have you, but we have to come to terms with ourselves as a person is at what cost, you know, that I continuously push this down in the name of playmaking and doing this, that what would I be more satisfied if I just had the opportunity to voice my idea or be able to say, okay, have you thought about these kind of questions instead of being the different, right? Some of you might ask a lot of that's just your energy, right? And we know we won't go into all the labels of the different types of energies, but I don't want to take that away from who you are and the person that you are. It's more really appreciating and understanding these things of different people. Now,
exactly.
as we wrap things up, is we had a couple of things when it comes to entrepreneurial type of business decision making that we probably want to touch on too. And what are these things about successful decision making is really avoiding those delays, right? So
Oh, yeah.
anybody that is an entrepreneur knows that you shouldn't avoid the delay of making one, keeping your ego, right, and emotions aside. So I think this is probably relevant just in general for anyone. We just talked about that. And taking expert advice. So it's okay that you don't know everything.
You're not
Imagine
supposed
that.
to. I mean, we don't have to be walking, talking encyclopedias, right? It's like asking for help. That's a big thing. Asking. And that's why you have a team in place. That's why you have business partners, collaborators, you name them. That's why people work together. We're not isolated islands.
Now here's a key one, because your first decision might be the decision to actually make a better decision. And this is seeking the right data. So if you don't have enough information, maybe your first decision is to get the right data.
Exactly. I
Instead
mean,
of
that's a
forcing a
good
decision.
point. Yeah, that's a good point. Like the first decision is like, first of all, you decide that you need to make a decision, because when you don't, that's actually another decision that you've just made. I'm not going to make any decision. So that's a
Right.
decision too.
And the first one might be that I don't have enough information, so go get it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Which
exactly.
then
What's stopping you?
goes with getting to the point of taking action. Now the last
Yeah.
one is, which I think is important, and this is again calculated risks that I mentioned, is be ready for the worst. Now, I always say I'm a plan A, plan B, plan C kind of girl. And it's because I have that kind of thinking, and when I read that last step, I kind of giggled to myself, because I was like, that kind of sounds like my plan A, B and C strategy, because you want to be ready for the worst. So that's very strategic, right? You kind of think about all the possible scenarios, so at least you don't have these surprises. So when we talk about experimenting, when we talk about making a decision, when we talk about doing any of these things, it doesn't mean that you're not smart about it.
Yeah, exactly. And what you said about surprises, that's so true. Like when you plan and when you look at different scenarios and you're preparing for the worst, that doesn't mean that the worst is necessarily going to happen. So don't get stuck there. But it's good that if you've planned for it and you've expected it won't surprise you, because the least you want to have is surprises, like the kind of bad surprises. And imagine, like we all know with the pandemic, those organizations or those businesses who thought about different scenarios were more ready to act in that kind of sudden change than others who didn't. So
And
that's a great example.
you would be surprised that when you get to a level of what I call the doers and the executors of organizations, that when you ask that question, what's your backup plan?
Mm-hmm.
You get deer, like
Yeah.
scared headlight kind of mode, like, and they don't have
What
one.
do you mean?
Or, oh my God, we actually have to think of that too. And it's surprising where part of decision making should be exactly related to that, and that is key. Hey Lee, what's up?
Hey,
You know what? I didn't put the chat on there. I don't know if it's going to show up.
put
Show
the
up?
chat on.
There we go.
Let's make Lee famous, but you have to add the comment, Veronica. Like,
Did I show it? There we go.
Ah, there it is.
So Lee says decision making is always such a challenge for people in any industry. So thank you for joining us, Lee, on that, because we're about to close up for today. And let's just summarize. Today it was all about really thinking about when we mean about empowerment. And what do we mean in organizations when it comes to decentralized decision making? That's a big topic out there when we talk about the employee experience, right? How to create highly motivated and engaged employees. Yeah, it has everything to do about decision making. Because if you can't trust them to make the right decisions, or have empowered them and taught them how to make good decisions, then you know that something's broken in the system right there.
Exactly. And involve them in those decisions, not after the decisions have been made and you're just communicating and asking them, are there any questions? No, that's not what we're talking about. Involve them, because that way you might be getting even better solutions and ones that you haven't thought about.
Now, as we wrap up, you can get on our GCW list by signing up for the latest events and exclusive learnings by going directly to our website. Yes, we're improving, but we got a quick landing page right now, gamechangingwork.com. Go ahead and go there, www.gamechangingwork.com. And we have also your persuasive public speaking for emerging leaders coming up.
Yeah, coming up, and I have only 10 spots because it's highly, highly interactive. I don't believe in any public speaking workshop that's not interactive, and that's not a lot of practice. So we only have 10 spots. The workshop is going to be on September 9th, and there's an early bird price if you register by September 3rd. So I'll put the link in the comments, and I'm happy to chat to you about it if you have any questions.
Awesome. And to close it up, next week, we're going to start launching in the month of September our creative, audacious topics as we try to find the most interesting ones that we're finding out there in the LinkedIn community. If you find any, please drop them in the comments, because if you see something that's interesting, let us know. We might bring it up here on the show. So we are going to talk about how to game plan your office days for overachievers. And so here's the question. Do you make your schedule like your boss's schedule? I'll let you guys think about that for next week.
Think about that. Put it in the comments. Let us know, because that's a huge topic, and you and I, we have a lot to say about it. So we're curious to see what your thoughts are on the topic on our next episode of the Game Changing Work Show.
Yeah. So if you want to go see all of our episodes that we have our library. It's on the YouTube Game Changing Work channel, so you can go and see all our archive of shows on there. But for next week, tune in, and we will see you same time, same bat channel, Tuesday at 12:15 next week. See you then. Bye now.
Bye.